shit at the pilot. Niggas be broken, be sobbing, but still talking shit like they violent.
Okay, so the more I read the comments from my Bill Russell video, the more I really think the 1960s might be the most disrespected era in basketball. Again, the arguments are just either hypocritical or just ignorant of the individual talent and the significance of the legends back then, specifically Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. Again, I can understand if you look at Bob Cousy and Jerry West, Sam Jones, and guys like that and think that they couldn't play in today's league. And I'd even understand why you think Bill Russell couldn't dominate the game today. But if there is one man you simply can't deny that can play today, it is Wilt Chamberlain. And again, for those who think he just dominated a bunch of scrubs back in the day, I still don't get that argument. Because even though back then, the basketball they played looked primitive, it was still common sense to put your biggest and best defender on the most unstoppable force in the league. And that means night in and night out, he would be guarded by the Bill Russells and Nate Thurmans, the Willis Reeds, and the Bob Pettits on a night in and night out basis. And with those guys also being the best offensive players in the league, Wilt was also responsible for guarding them on the defensive end. And I think even back then, it was common sense to double team and triple team Wilt. And since you want to use the whole there were only 8 teams in the 60s argument, that would also mean that he would face the Celtics 9 times in the regular season with Bill Russell, like he did in 1966, Walt Bellamy and the Knicks 10 times, Nate Thurman and the Warriors 9 times, etc., etc. So that would be the equivalent of LeBron James facing the Spurs with Kawhi and the Warriors with KD 20 times in a single season. And if you want to use the whole pace argument, well, that improves Wilt's case even more because he averaged 46 minutes per game his whole career, which is insane. To put it into perspective, the pace right now is around 96 possessions per game. The year Wilt averaged 50 points, it was at around 128. And that year, he never sat out a game. And I mean that literally. 80 games, 48 minutes each, plus the overtime games. He did not sit out a single game or a single minute. So to put that into perspective, Wilt was running back and forth around the court 34 more times per game than the player who would play a full 48-minute game in 2017. And we all know no one plays 48 minutes today. And Wilt did this for 80 games in a season plus the playoffs. His stamina was unbelievable. So he obviously has the stamina to play at the highest level today. Now let's look at his athleticism. And goddamn, Wilt Chamberlain was athletic. The man stood at 7 foot 1 inches tall, the same height as Rudy Gobert, had a 7'8" wingspan, which is longer than Hassan Whiteside, had 11.5-inch hands, larger than LeBron, Jordan, and Kawhi, was 300 pounds, bigger than Andre Drummond, had a 4.6 second 40-yard dash, and this was in college, and he ran it barefoot. To put it into comparison, LeBron James has the same 40-yard dash time, and I already talked about his stamina. Now his vertical I left out at the end for a reason, because his vertical was actually pretty iffy. Some people, if not most people, say he had a 48-inch vertical, but the people who did were either Wilt himself, and as we saw with KD and his height, some of these athletes lie just to make themselves look better, or either just word of mouth. There was never really any video evidence or recorded data that suggested he had a 48-inch vertical. If he's 7 foot 1 and he had a 48-inch vertical, theoretically the top of his head should be at around 11 feet in the air, which means his head should be way above the rim. And because there wasn't really a lot of video footage back then, I haven't found any footage of that. So if you have any footage, please send it in the comment section down below. But then you do have to account that back then, the only reason players would jump that high would be to block, and blocking is more of a read and react type of movement. You don't focus just on getting as high as you can, you focus more on timing and being able to put your hand on the ball. So who knows? But what we do know is he was a 3-time high jump champion in college, and based off that, I would say his vertical is at the least 39 inches. In comparison, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and Blake Griffin all have less than 37 inches. So essentially what I'm saying here is, imagine Rudy Gobert with LeBron's speed and leaping ability. That, sir, is Wilt Chamberlain. So I think he for sure passes the athleticism test. And I think just off what I said, at the least, in today's NBA, he's Rudy Gobert. At the very least. And now we look at his offensive skill set. Because what is a body if you can't really do anything with it on a basketball court? And this is where it gets interesting. If you look at his offensive highlights, he had this nearly unstoppable post fadeaway, considering the fact that one, he was leaning backwards, and again, his leaping ability allowed him to essentially float in midair longer than anyone else. And I don't think that's gonna be guarded in the NBA today. You can only hope he misses. And I know whoop-de-doo, one move, right? That's still one more move than DeAndre Jordan, who averaged 13 points per game this season. So we can stop that argument right there. And he also had a plethora of post moves that would trick bigs even today. Although some of his post moves are a little unorthodox, like that post lay-in that he does that would easily get blocked by a good defender like Whiteside or Gobert today. But going back to his offensive skill set, a prime Wilt Chamberlain, being the track star that he was and his insane stamina that allowed him to average 46 minutes his whole entire career, I think could easily keep up on the fast break in today's league. Similar to a guy like Anthony Davis, maybe even a little better. And as a passer, Wilt may be the best passing big the league has ever seen. I mean, this man led the league in assists once at 8.6 and averaged 7.8 the year before. And I know the pace, but let's say we cut it in half. That's still 4.3 assists per game. To put into perspective, last year only 4 centers in the league averaged more than 4 assists, those being Marc Gasol, Nikola Jokic, Al Horford, and DeMarcus Cousins. Now again, I don't think he can stretch the floor like, let's say, Anthony Davis or Kristaps, which is extremely valuable in today's league, and his free throw shooting has always been at around 50 to 60%, so that's gonna be a problem. So to me, the best comparison to Wilt Chamberlain today is a more athletic and a better passing Hassan Whiteside, who averaged 17 points on 56% shooting from the field, 14 rebounds, and 2 blocks. So if you brought Wilt from 1964 in a time machine and replaced Hassan Whiteside on the Miami Heat, I could see Wilt averaging 20 to 22 points on 53% shooting from the field, 13 to 15 rebounds, 4 to 5 assists, and 2 to 3 blocks per game. And I don't know about you, but that guy right there is still a top 3 center in the league and arguably the best today. And the key part to bringing up guys like Wilt and Bill Russell into today's game is just what I said, if you put them in a time machine. Because I feel like something really important that people miss about these generation to generation comparisons is how these players learn to play the game. When Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain were growing up, who were they looking up to? George Mikan? Now you look at the bigs today, who did they look up to? Hakeem, Garnett, Dirk, Shaq. They learn their moves. They can watch their games in a click of a button. They can study their game. While in Wilt's time, I'm not even sure if they could watch Mike and play at home. They'd either have to watch them live, just hear from word of mouth, or not know about them at all. So at the most, they had 2 hours to study a player's game, and they had to essentially have photographic memory. Meanwhile, today, you can slide this video to the bottom right of your screen, look up Hakeem Olajuwon highlights, and study their game for days as much as you want. And not to mention, players today benefit from the advanced nutrition and training. I mean, have you seen LeBron in that big-ass bubble? Like, what the hell is that? And I say this to say, instead of bringing Wilt into a time machine, let's say Wilt was born in 1993, the same year Anthony Davis was born. And he grew up to still be the man that he was, with the same competitive fire and the same measurements and vertical, etc., etc. He would have been watching Hakeem, Dirk, KG, Shaq. He'd have a much more polished offensive game. He could probably shoot the 3 and have more post moves. He would have had the advanced training and nutrition that these players have today, so potentially his vertical could get higher. He could have got stronger. I mean, the potential is just sky high for Wilt Chamberlain. And I think if that was the case for Wilt, I mean, anything's possible. And I just think it's unfair to judge these players in the 60s and say, put them in today's league and what would they do? Because they don't have nearly all the benefits that the players today do. And they grew up watching and looking up to guys that basically only mastered the fundamentals of the game and nothing more. They were the ones that took it to another level. Meanwhile, players of today watch players who expanded off of the players of the 60s. But the fact that we still use the time machine method, and theoretically Wilt would at least average 17 points, 14 rebounds, and 2 blocks is insane and shows how timeless of a player he is. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I am out.